So my name's Angela. I work alongside Greg's team, and just to give you a flavour of my background, I have consistently worked in the arts, which basically equates to working for free or low pay most of the time. So I've done tons of stuff to supplement that choice. Not a very strategic choice, but I've done a ton of stuff. And the stuff that I think was probably going to be relevant for you, I've started up I've started up a couple of companies. I've freelanced. When I graduated from my undergraduate degree, within about 6 months, was apprenticing for somebody in graphic design. And then with him and somebody else, we started up a production company. And there, because it was 3 of us, we basically did any role that needed doing that we didn't have expertise in. If we couldn't afford the expertise or thought we could kind of do things ourselves, we did. So I got to do a lot of different things, including some editing, but I won't profess to being an editor. I used an old system that I think is obsolete, that no one will have heard of now, SpeedRaiser.
I know SpeedRaiser.
Do you? Yeah.
Do you guys have SpeedRaiser?
No one would see it's too old, Greg. It was in the days when we couldn't afford Avid, and Final Cut Pro was just sort of finding its feet. So you don't know in advance that a piece of software is going to become obsolete. You won't be able to say that you've used it anyway. So we did video production, graphic design, some marketing, and latterly some sound. And then I went on to do various freelancing bits. Essentially, a bit of a generalist. Another way to look at that is a jack of all trades and master of none, but it has its charms. Anyway, so I'm here now. I work here part-time. I also study part-time, so I get how challenging it is for you guys actually juggling the two and trying to find time to really prioritise studies which you're interested in, but somebody's paying you to do a job, and that's how we tend to prioritise. Just to be pragmatic. So this session, I'm just going to give you a broad overview of the kinds of things that we'll look at, and we'll look at research methods, because I don't want to take that for granted. We're in an academic institution, and this is a kind of fundamental mindset, and it relates quite closely to the project brief. So it's really what I tend to do in the first session of any module, not just for people that I think are time constrained, is to outline the end goal, so that you can be really strategic about the time that you spend, and make sure that it's going to pay some kind of return on the investment of your time. Please, I'm going to get into monologue mode if no one interrupts me, so I encourage lots of questions if I'm not clear in any area. Okay, so I'll introduce you to the module, what you're aiming for and how you're going to get that, and also talk about research methods. I think I've just said that. So the project brief, you guys should be enrolled onto the module course for this, the code being FPP13202. It's a bit of a mouthful, but that's a screenshot taken from the page, and I've enrolled what I think is the right class. So you should be able to gain access to that. And on there, you'll find the project brief, which we can have a look at now. I also want to talk about the assessment submission procedures. Greg, maybe you can give me the nod if that's appropriate, because UAL tightened up their ship, didn't they? Their ship was tight. We've tightened up our ship in alignment with UAL, who award your degrees. And so just to be really clear about what it means when we ask you to submit in a particular format on a particular day at a very specific time, what that means and what the margin for error is, because essentially we're operating at zero tolerance. So I think it's really nice to get that up front so that you know that we can't influence the procedures anymore. And then we'll just take a look at the Moodle page, which I know you're going to be enthralled with, because Moodle's great and we all know it. But also to look at how potentially we can look at the Moodle page to mitigate or to take a view on you as a student here. That will make sense later, so we'll get to that. So have a look at the Moodle page, which this is not. And here it is. You've got just a couple of links. I'll try and keep it quite minimal for you guys, because hands up if you feel like if I keep banging on about how time constrained you are, it's not relevant. it's relevant, right? I'm on the right page with that. Okay, good. Because I'm a part-time student, and for me, it's a challenge. So here we've got the project brief. Click on the link; it'll take you through, and this tells you what you're aiming for. It's also useful for us to kind of run through in summary form what this means, so that you can ask me any questions while I'm in front of you. Not that you won't have an opportunity to ask me questions at other stages, but here I am, nothing like a bit of face-to-face time, and this is it. This is our window. So what we're dealing with here is a written document, and it's going to be a document that demonstrates your understanding of broadcast or post-production, specifically industries, in terms of what the strategic business issues are underpinning the way things look on the surface. So it's really taking a step back from the day-to-day workflow and thinking about the industry and organisations within that. It's a broader context, so it's quite nice that we've got James talking about his context later. Right. Is it helpful if I go through this now? Yeah? Okay, good. Post-production sector in the UK, as I'm sure you're all aware, is a vibrant one, but it is also a place where things change quickly, as I know, because things become obsolete really quickly. So technology is a key driver in post-production, and technology is a massively dynamic industry, and things are changing and becoming obsolete. As consumers of different products, you'll know that because you've just invested in an HD TV. I don't know, I'm just assuming that you're into your gadgets. So you've just invested in HD TV. Now everyone's talking about 4K, they're talking about curved streams, and you're questioning whether you should invest into that, because it's not just one device. You need to ensure cross-platform compatibility and a wide range of things. So as consumers, you do understand that. So it's about, really, because you're in the industry that you're in, the ability to take a step back and reflect in a wider sense on that industry is going to be useful for you to progress your careers, for sustained careers. It depends where you're aiming with this. Right now, you're probably still feeling like you're getting your feet under the table with things, learning the technique, the craft. So some of this is going to be slightly premature for some of you in terms of thinking about a strategic direction, but it really will help in even an entry-level role to reflect to your potential employer or potential client that you have an understanding of some of these issues. So business models have changed, and this is beyond post-production. This is throughout creative economies in particular, because creative economies are made up of predominantly very small organisations or freelancers. And for that reason, they are very responsive. They don't take an age to respond to changes like bigger organisations and institutions. And they also rely on technology quite fundamentally for their output. So that means that they are subject to those seas of changes that we see. So business models have changed. Companies can quickly gain competitive advantage, and they can quickly lose competitive advantage. So there isn't really any space for complacency, either as an individual, as a freelancer, or if you're a company. And where companies in the creative economies generally, and probably a good example of this is the music industry, where companies have become complacent and thought that they have a good amount of the market share and they've been doing what they've been doing for years and don't need to respond to changes happening, sometimes led by the consumer on the ground, they've been proven wrong. And we've seen that most visibly probably in the music industry, where they felt that they could rely on legislation and existing infrastructure to keep the business model that they had up to that point, and that no longer works. And frankly, people don't, if you talk to people in your industry, some people will have an idea of future forecasting within a certain time frame, but really people don't know unless you've got a very strategic mind and you understand the technology quite deeply. And often those are two different mindsets. People don't really know. They can't predict the future. So it's about developing skills for yourself that will allow you, regardless of the context in which you find yourself, to be of value tomorrow and the day after and the week after and so on. So thinking about how the post sector is segmented and what companies do to differentiate themselves and future-proof themselves, who their clients are and how that's changed over time. Who are post houses and facilities houses? Who are they servicing? And how do they see the different groups that they're servicing? How does technology changes impact things like 3D, cloud, file transfer protocol, new codecs, compression formats? There's a whole range of things, and we can't be experts in everything. So you need to think about where your focus is, and ideally develop some general level knowledge in across a number of areas. But you also want to be, fairly deep in at least one or two areas as well. So for this project brief, you will be writing about those kinds of issues, and it's up for you to decide what the angle will be and where you'll choose your focus. Pragmatically speaking, you might have an interest that you'd like to research and write about, or you might already have some level of expertise that it just makes practical sense to start from there and focus on that and start writing about. But you will be writing a report, an article that would be at home in a broadcast or in a broadsheet paper. So it's about understanding what you're looking for, starting the research process, and actually the understanding of what you're looking for often comes after you've started looking, and then drawing that in and making it your own and communicating it in a fairly compelling way in an article. So you will need to consult a number of different sources and synthesize those, and by that I mean combine those sources into something that is your own. So that means in your own in terms of tone, but also if you consult a range of sources, it could be that you identify a gap that none of those sources address directly, but that from having developed some expertise in that field, you've seen an angle that nobody's either foreseen or they just haven't covered it yet. Yeah. So that's quite, that's like a great way to approach it. But it could be that you're writing about something that has been covered, but you're really passionate about it, and that will also make for compelling reading. Does that make sense so far? Okay. I do realise at this point I have been talking for a while. So that's going to be a report of up to 1,500 words. Let's see if there are any. Where does it say that there? Yeah, scope and direction of that will be negotiated. So we'll basically, we'll go through research methods, because research is the foundation. So that's what we're going to cover today, because research is its own thing. We feel like we have access to the world through the Google search bar. And that's, it's a wonderful thing, because we don't necessarily have to go and track things down in person. So we get to be a bit lazy and do desk research. But it also means you really need to know what you're looking for. Otherwise you can spend hours not really getting a good return on investment, and that's a term that I've used twice now, so I'll try and think of a synonym for it, because it is about making each hour that you put in worth the output on the other side. So it does say on here somewhere, I'm failing to see it, but it does say 1,500 words. So it's not a lot, and one of the challenges, I think, is to write something really compelling in space of 1,500 words. If you had 5,000 words, actually you can get away with more than you can if you have fewer words. So you need to make each word proportionately as useful. If you're finding that you're kind of waffling, or you're not kind of retaining a focus, we'll go through the stages in which you can help yourself develop a focus and retain a focus. But generally, my general rule of thumb is, if you're in any doubt about something, leave it out. It's really, we do lose focus quickly with things that we find interesting, and we've only got 1,500 words. So, okay, I'm going to cover this now so that we get it out of the way. And tell me, Greg, if any of this is off. I've just assumed that it's the same deal for these guys as it is for the rest of the guys. So you've been uploading stuff to Moodle, so you know how that works. You know that Moodle can be a bit glitchy at times. You know that if you have a deadline that is probably the same deadline that, you know, half the undergrads here have. You might not be able to log on. You know, you might have a bit of a quirky internet system at home. I would always generally say upload 24 hours in advance of the deadline, because that gives you a soft deadline in your head. If you get that locked in, you will give yourself a window for error, and it's just, you know, this is the advice I wish I could give myself when I was younger. It's not leaving everything to the last minute. So that's what I always suggest, 24 hours in advance, set that date in your mind, because you need to upload via Moodle. You can't email anybody. If you email one of the tutors, it's going to be a fail. So it actually needs to go via Moodle. If you have any issues with Moodle, you won't be considered to have submitted, whether that issue is to do with your ISP, if it's to do with Moodle on our end, it's not something that you'll be able to claim as a legitimate reason for not uploading. If you submit your assignment in a format that we can't read, it's going to be a fail. So what I would suggest for this, I mean, it's a simple report, so it's less of an issue, I would say, in this area, but PDF is probably the right format because it retains the formatting. It's very compatible. Word is also generally fine, but please, I caution against using Pages, because big institutions like Ravensbourne don't update their software to the latest incarnation. So generally big organisations, for safety and for allowing software updates to kind of have the bugs worked out for them, they work about 3 iterations behind, and we do that. So you probably have more recent versions of software than we do, and Pages is pretty unreliable in that respect. So I won't labour the point, but I just get nervous that, you know, you don't want to have written it and uploaded it in time and then we just can't open it. Okay, on Moodle, so all my contact details, because I want to make myself available for you guys in a number of different ways, just so that whatever times of day and mediums you use, I'm in some way accessible for you. It also has your assessment information. I have and am curating some useful resources, and if it's on there, it's because there's a consensus here that it's useful for your project brief. It's not on there because it's a nice graphic, and your information is tracked on Moodle. So this again, I think you guys probably aren't like the typical undergrads, but I'll go through my little spiel, just indulge me. So everyone tracks your data. It's a huge source of business value and therefore revenue for companies like Facebook. So Facebook are even tracking you when you're logged out. They get wrapped over the knuckles on a regular basis. Essentially, because technology is this dynamic, uncharted territory, companies at the forefront of that, they basically try things out. And until we catch up with them and we go, that doesn't bode well, it's unethical, that's surely contravening some kind of human right. And then the systems kick in and they have to rein it back in. But initially, they have a period in which they can get away with stuff, and they push the envelope because they can, because they're ahead of the game. So they're doing lots of stuff. Google, similarly, doing lots of stuff. Somebody told me about Google search history yesterday. If you Google, it's deeply ironic, if you Google search history, you have to be signed in to do it. Apparently you can track your search history for 10 years or more. They keep every search that you've ever done on them. So I found that a little bit freaky. But for example, Google exploited security weakness in Safari. If anyone uses Safari as a browser, it's not a particularly safe browser, but it's it was exploited by Google. They're now paying out $17 million because they, in an unauthorized manner, installed a plugin into Safari if people did certain actions through Safari, and they probably gotten more than £17 million of business value in the period that they were getting away from it. So that's what Google do. But Ravensbourne also track your data. Did you know? So obviously, I'm putting us alongside Facebook and Google because we're that good and we're that switched on. But if anyone's interested, I can show you what that means in person. It's an interesting diversion, and students are always kind of jaw to the ground on this one because I guess when you see the tangible evidence of something, it brings it to life. I can talk about Facebook and all the things they do, but unless we were to see what that means in practice, unfortunately, I don't have those privileges, so I can't provide you with that. But on Moodle, we track the way that you interact with the Moodle page. Generally, that's not an issue. It wouldn't be of any interest, but if you guys are going to challenge grades, or if there's any doubt around your submission, anything to do with your papers, then we look at your records. It's what we've got. It's not the only measure, but it is a very kind of robust measure. I mean, it tells us the date, the time, where you were, and how you interacted, and that builds up a picture. It's not the truth, but it certainly is one measure of how you've interacted with the course. So I guess what I'm saying is check out the Moodle page on a regular basis. It's a bit of preventative kind of action. Okay, so the dates for this module, you're going to have your formative on the 11th of February. Is that true? Have I gotten those dates correct? Yeah, I think I have. I'm going to say that I've got those dates correct because I've been doing a lot of dates this week, and I've slightly lost whether these dates, but I can't imagine they'd be in there if they were incorrect. Let me send out an email to confirm the correctness of the dates. For some reason, I'm doubting myself in the moment, but I imagine they're on there because I've put them on there with a good reason. And as you can see, I suggest that you upload things 24 hours in advance, so the 10th of March rather than the 11th. It's all making sense? I'm moving through a pace. Good. Okay, so yeah, stick that in your diary so that you know what you're working towards. So research, we're going to talk a little bit about research now. Research methods. We've got primary research. I'm just breaking this down in fairly fundamental ways. It's not it's not a comprehensive overview, but I think in order for you just to cover the fundamentals in the way that you approach researching for your project. Primary research is really important. So any ideas what this picture's about? That's right. That's how we think about primary research. In some way, it was just, there weren't any degrees of separation between the data, i.e. the information probably coming out of somebody's mouth when you talk to them, or some other measure, and you collecting it. Secondary research is obviously at least second-hand. It can be more than second-hand. But those are the ways to think about primary and secondary research. What would somebody say are key advantages of primary research? What might that give you that secondary research wouldn't?
There's something coming.
Sorry?
Sort of news and information. Like if you do secondary, it might be backdated or out.
Yeah, secondary is probably already out of date, depending on what you're asking somebody about. There's definitely a time lag. I mean, primary, has its own challenges, but in terms of advantages of primary, okay, it's immediate. Anything else? Rather than kind of doing desk research on your computer, why would it be a good idea to go out and talk to people?
It's reliable. Primary research
Primary research is reliable. Yeah, I mean, yeah. No, just in case anyone's not aware, Wikipedia is not considered a robust academic research tool because it's unpoliced. I mean, it's a wonderful thing because it's, an open source platform, and we love those for lots of reasons. But in terms of ensuring quality standards, we just can't be sure. So I wouldn't reference Wikipedia too much in this. So reliability, I don't know. It really depends on who you've got in front of you. It's reliable that they said it, so that part's reliable. But whether they were informed, or whether they had a comprehensive viewpoint, or whether what they're saying relates directly or is in some way biased, that's where your powers of discernment will come into play. Why else? What are the other advantages of going out into the real world and talking to real human beings for you guys? not like in academia land, because I can tell you all about that, but for you guys going out and talking?
Because we're focusing on Pacific Close House, obviously if we're going out doing primary research, we'll be able to see firsthand how it works.
You will be able to see firsthand how it works, and you have a wonderful excuse. People love students. They love enthusiasm when it comes to their company or something that they've done. And something I would suggest, if and I do suggest that you do primary research, something that I would suggest in advance is you do your homework on the company that you're approaching and the person within the company that you're approaching. Because it's kind of flattering, if nothing else, but it also is, it's about you being prepared and valuing their time and not rocking up and asking questions that demonstrate that you haven't valued their time by being underprepared. So make sure that your research is really top-loaded before you go and follow up with some primary research. But it's a great excuse to get in front of people, expand your network, and just have a legitimate reason to request time. And it could be that they sign up for you ask for a brief chat on the phone, or you ask for a brief, can I buy you coffee, like really brief kind of foot in the door with it. But if they're interested and they see that you're interested, then that will likely extend, and then you have the option to keep them warm beyond that. So that's why it's really good for you guys. In terms of reliability, I guess depends on who you're asking, what you're asking about. Generally, in research terms, we tend to normalise our samples. So we would take a larger sample, which you guys may or may not have, and we would try and normalise for things like age and gender and all those other kinds of things that might bias the results in some way. Obviously, we're not going to expect you to do that, but what I would really want to see is primary research, and ideally I want you to talk to more than one person. If you've got a particular company that you're approaching, approach the competitors so that you get a more balanced view of the subject that you're in discussions about. If you are approaching someone within a company that's a tech bod, then please go and speak to somebody in business development or marketing, or somebody who's customer or client facing, so that you get a balanced perspective within the same company. Those are some of the measures where you can start to cross-reference your sources. Okay, another very broad stroke of how we distinguish types of research is qualitative research. So that's about understanding the whys of something. So you are digging into the reasons, and you're digging into the very human side of the issue or area being explored. And it used to be that qualitative research kind of had quite a distinct place in science and in academia. It was the remit of sociologists and psychologists, and it wasn't particularly well respected in the hard sciences. But they did love a bit of quantitative research where it was all about number crunching, which is also valid. That's what's happening when Facebook scrape your data, and there's clearly value in that, right? Some of the adverts that you'll get pushed to you are a little bit off, but sometimes they get it really right. So this is not about understanding the reasons why. This is about establishing patterns by looking at numbers, and it has its value. So hard sciences would generally look at quantitative data, but what's happening more and more with research now is that there's a blend of the two, because we understand that there's value in both, and we're not going to separate them out artificially if that doesn't make sense for us. If you're doing something that's purely about, algorithms used in, processing images, then I think you probably will have a slightly more quantitative bent to your work. But at this point, I would suggest it probably, as a rule of thumb, it's a good idea to start off with a blend between the two. I was going to say something else, but I don't remember what that is. Again, if you're going to do anything quantitative, it's about numbers. So if you go online and get industry reports and consultation papers written by companies about the sector or about some element within the sector, they probably will highlight lots of facts and figures. That's, we're in the cult of the infographic at the moment. And the caveat that I have here is that research is about developing powers of personal judgment and discernment. So statistics are highly, treat them with suspicion at best. You get what you look for, and then you make sense of that based on what you decide to use to interpret that. So they're very subject to different interpretations, and you can include and exclude certain things. So it's really useful to think about the processes that underlie some of the statistics that companies will highlight on reports and consultation documents, because there's generally an agenda. If for no other reason, somebody's funding them to write that. Yeah. So exercise your own powers of discernment, and if you don't know what that means yet, then that's the journey to undertake that will take you beyond this module, because that's going to serve you well for the future. But certainly for this module, just developing a sense of, is this worth my time to look at or not, just makes really practical sense, because you don't want to be trawling through lots and lots of research and not having it really contribute to your output. Partly, your discernment will come just through wading through stuff. So there's not really a shortcut to that, but I think at least if you keep that as a focus in your mind to be discerning, then it will help you. Okay, research flowchart. This is a lovely little diagram. It basically says you have a low return on investment. Oh, I've used it 3 times now. It's clearly the phrase of the day. Low return on investment with tons of stuff, like you're just wading through online stuff, getting books out of libraries. I don't know. Does anyone get books out of libraries these days? E-books, Kindle books, borrowing, anything? Yeah. Okay. 1. Just one of you. 2 of you. Any offers on 2?
I used to do microfiche.
You used to do what?
Microfiche, where you get microfilm.
Aha.
Yeah, so it's a bit too old school.
Wow.
I stick the books straight to the old newspapers.
Okay. And you used to do that because just like interesting to.
Yeah, just thought I'd make it work.
It's like what the detectives used to do, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm talking about sort of relatively recent stuff. Well, we'll look at some of the resources that you guys have got available through Ravensbourne, because you've got a ton of stuff. But probably you'll be wading around in what feels like a bit of a quagmire, not really getting the results, and then you have kind of this process that doesn't, you haven't really consciously undertaken it, but all of a sudden, bang, you feel like you have an understanding of the field, you have an ability to synthesize and articulate your ideas. It kind of, comes together in quite surprising ways. But really, if I was being a bit, more realistic about it, you're basically looking for a while about what the problem is. And by problem, I don't mean that there is a problem. It's just if you're writing about something, there needs to be some compelling line of inquiry, something that, is a problem, or something that you're arguing for that hasn't been looked at before, some reason why people would be engaged by what you're writing. And then you do something called a literature review, basically go out and find, is anyone written about that? And if they have, you start reading, and if they've written around the subject, not quite about that, but things related, you also read that. You basically identify what your line of inquiry is. And I would suggest that you get this process started sooner rather than later, because the sooner you can get to the clear idea of what you're aiming for, the easier your research becomes. You just know what to exclude, and knowing what to exclude is probably the most time-saving and sanity retaining device. It just really allows you to focus, and I speak from bitter experience, so that's what you will do during your literature review, and then you will explain why you think it's important, right? So that's at that point you start to really understand what you're talking about and why other people should listen when you talk about it. So these are all, concepts of communication. So I'm sorry if some of this stuff's a little bit obvious, but it helps to structure it out, because when you're writing, it will be a structure. Writing is a structured way of organising your thoughts. So I wouldn't suggest kind of free-form writing. You are being assessed as, within the parameters of it being an article for a broadsheet or something like broadcast. So really think about what research already exists, think about why what you're looking at is important for other people as well as yourself. You want to formulate some questions, and I would suggest if you can actually formulate questions with real question marks at the end of them, it will really help you retain focus again. So does anyone have a vague idea of what they might discuss at this point in time?
I'm not confused actually. Obviously we're focusing on the Pacific Post House, so would it be...
Not necessarily on a specific post house.
Oh, that's what it says here in the brief.
Where?
It says, using your own primary and secondary research, you will write a report that focuses on the Pacific Post House. And then
So it does.
something we have to be written in a style appropriate for an industry-focused publication. Like, what sort of report is that? Like, is that any different to a normal report, or
A normal report being what?
like starting all the information and conclusion at the end?
Yeah, I mean, basically, something that could be an article. So we'll go through some of the structures of it at a certain point and how you can approach that, how you can kind of deconstruct what that means, yeah, in terms of article writing. But you can, I mean, there are lots of different reports. So this is a report that would be something within a broadsheet. So it could be an industry-specific publication, but it could also be something that's a bit more generalised. So focus on a specific post house, yes, but I would not only write about the issues of that post house, you definitely want to contextualise it.
Yeah. Should we try and cover as many of these questions as possible, or should we think of our own?
Yeah, no, don't cover as many as possible. I don't think that would be feasible within 1,500 words.
So let's
So-
focus on a couple.
Yeah, or even focus on one if you so choose. But in terms of how although you can focus on one post house, I would definitely keep a contextual awareness. So if you don't situate that post house within a wider context, it doesn't demonstrate that you understand what the issues are weaving through the industry and the competitors. So yeah, sorry, it does say focus on a particular post house, but I definitely would suggest situate that in a wider context.
Can I just jump in? I wonder if that makes it a little too narrow. I mean, it could be broader, perhaps. I guess what probably needs to happen is that you don't want to spread your net too wide and in a sense give a report on, a snapshot on the post sector in the UK. But maybe it doesn't have to be a single post house. I guess that maybe it could be about a particular kind of trend. I mean, looking at, for example, one of the some of the reports from last year, what they were, some of the reports were about production companies, for example, that have a big post presence. So it could be that, or it could be perhaps different models. So I'm wondering if it should be a little broader than that. So, for example, like a post-production company like Salon. If you check Salon, that's not a post house, but it is one of those companies, in a sense, that has been a game changer. Because what they do, their services are about flyaway, if you like, a post house to go. So they'll set up a facility wherever you're working, out on location. So perhaps by us saying post house, that makes it too kind of bricks and mortar and fit, where perhaps it should be more about a specific trend, or it could be about the post house that you're working in. I guess, perhaps we should make it as broad as that.
Yeah. I mean, we had a session today and yesterday by a LinkedIn expert who was getting all students to set up profiles. And actually, when it came to the posties, she was saying, why don't you broaden out? Because she was talking through how they can look for work. And she said, what people aren't necessarily realising at the the level that we were teaching at is that places like Bloomberg and big corporations have in-house facilities, and they have in-house editors and, people doing visual effects and all kinds of things that you wouldn't necessarily think of. So if that is an area, I'm not seeing a huge amount of enthusiasm for that, but if that's an area that you'd like to think about, then I think we can accommodate that.
Yes, I think perhaps we should. I'm just looking at for example, last year one of their students wrote about, in fact, several students wrote about places where they would like to work. And for one of them, it was Vice. Do you know Vice? Okay, so that's a game changer too. It's not a post-production facility, but they employ shooter editors, people who can tell whole stories. And, they're in the news. They only relatively recently, Murdoch injected a huge sum of money into this. Do you know about this? So Vice started off fairly small and they've expanded, and Rupert Murdoch probably is looking to companies like Vice as a new model beyond TV, where people consume news stories. And the people working there have this extraordinary skill set, that they are storytellers, because all editors are storytellers essentially, but these people go out and tell the stories, they're journalists too. Just keep looking at one of the other projects, one of the other reports was about one of our students was desperate to work in the trailer industry. And you should think about this, as an opportunity to try and open a door and talk to people who might help you move on in your career. Make feature films, so can you think of a question that might open a door for you to do with trade and that industry? So this guy was looking at what is the industry for the film trailer industry. He wants to make film trailers. And he really wants secretly, and not so secretly, to get a job doing that for a living. And the best place to do it is this one that he identified, and so he, on the pretext, genuine mission to go and find out more about the industry and the commercial model for that company that just make trailers. Who are the competitors, and how tough is it, in this market to make a living from making film trailers. And so he got a foot in the door that way.
Yeah. I think it also, depends on on the angle at which you're approaching the article. So it depends whether you want to communicate something about the sector trends and focus on a kind of, some kind of business model change or technology that's led to some kind of change in distribution or the way that people work, or whether you want to, discuss the changes within a couple of leading facilities houses in central London. I don't know. So, if you have any questions around what fits within the brief and what doesn't, then just, get in touch and we'll get an answer to you really quickly. But we'll just try and, essentially, we'll try and find something that makes sense for you being out there and wanting to progress your careers. Yeah, and if we can make that work within the brief, then we will.
Angela a couple of times mentioned Broadcast as a possible destination for this kind of report. How many of you have read Broadcast magazine?
2.
2. Do the rest of you know about Broadcast at least?
I read it once or twice, not an average.
No. But we would like you to be, all of you, to be a reader of that magazine, if only for this term.
Just as an exercise.
As an exercise, to give you a sense of the style that you might want to be writing, but also as a place where you might pick up a story or two that you might want to amplify, because it is the pulse of the UK media industry, broadcast industry.
Good. Okay. A couple of other bits. Sources. Not all sources are equal, so I really would like to see a cross-section of where you've gone for information here. So, obviously, blog reports, news articles. Again, within each of these kind of subdivisions, you have some that are, robust in terms of their output and then their style and the kind of quality of their research, and some that are not, some that are just people's opinions and it's not particularly well considered and it's not not based in practical experience that they have of the industry. So really think about power of discernment with that. And one of the things, unfortunately, that's happened with the advent of online marketing is that people tend to repurpose other people's content because it actually helps with SEO, search engine optimization, and various other things. But just because you see it in a number of different places doesn't mean that it's true, doesn't mean that it's reliable. So again, exercise caution. If in any doubt, just holler and I will give you my very restrained opinion about what I think of it. And it could be that it's news to me, so I'll have to do a bit of research too, but I like researching. Blogs can be really good, and we'll look at ways that you can be quite ruthless about the kinds of time that you spend on actually going out and actively searching for news, because if the advent of technology has given us anything, it's the ability to be overwhelmed with information. So it's about applying a little bit of ruthlessness to that. Okay, Ravensbourne Study Zone. Who's actually been in the library and or made use? Wow, 2 again. 2's the magic number. Or was that a scratch of the nose, or is it a full raising of the hands? Yeah, we've got some facilities here. Aside from the physical facilities, which I'm kind of assuming won't be used, we've got things like ebooks. You've got a login for the study zone. I've also put a link on your Moodle page, so you can, within one click, once you're in Moodle, you can access it and find out what resources are there. They do have subscriptions to a ton of stuff. They've also got resources divided up by course. So we've got television, film and broadcasting in there, and that gives you focused topics within a range of different formats. We've got something called interlibrary loans. If you find that there's a university or a library near you and you feel like you'd be more inclined to physically visit that, and there's a book that is calling your name, then potentially we can get you in that library and get that book out for you. There is a section on the study zone page called developing your research skills. And I do suggest that you look at that, because there are a couple of really useful things on there. One of them is a Prezi presentation on, I think it's on Google searching, which includes things like Boolean searching and really kind of finding very focused ways into the raft of information out there. So you want to really develop your searching skills if you're going to do any kind of research. I forget what the other thing on there is, but there are 2 really useful resources on there. I encourage you to check them out. It doesn't take that long, and even if you just learn a little bit about how to make Google work for you and the different kinds of things available through Google. Anyone use Google Scholar, for example? Yep, a couple of you are. So it may not be that useful for what you're doing here, but I've talked myself out of it now. Okay. There are some surprising places where you can get news feeds. Anyone feel like they get value from Twitter? It's a research tool. It's actually an academic research tool, weirdly. I mean, do you use it, Greg?
Which one?
Twitter, for research purposes.
Not so often, no.
No, but I speak to many academics that do, which is always a bit of a surprise, because I think the format of Twitter for me doesn't allude to research, but I guess it's just a sort of signposting mechanism, and then you get sent out into other areas. By that same token, other platforms which you're likely to be on will also be able to yield some results for you. Facebook and LinkedIn, again, kind of signposting. You find a group, find people that blog that have links to stuff that they do outside of these platforms, and that's a nice way in to get access to things that you might not otherwise find so easily. So you can't find them. Lots of places, these are the places that I tend to go to for tech stuff, if you're somebody that thinks they're going to have a tech focus in what you write about. Anyone not know what any of those are? Speak now, I can bore you to death about them.
What's the Vulture?
The Vulture is in the Register. Not Engadget, the Register. So it's just a techie thing. It's a bit like, it's a bit more technical than TechCrunch. Somewhere along the lines of Engadget, I would put those 2 together. So it has a range of different things. It also, technology and business is really inextricably linked these days. So when I talk about tech, unless we're in, like a very specific industry association, a forum of some kind, generally speaking, with these platforms, they will get you to a page that will have a range of information that covers both of those bases, because technology is it influences everything we do, not least of which is the way that we exchange money with each other. Does everyone know what RSS is? Everyone subscribing to news feeds? It's basically ways of getting push notifications, getting all of these sources of information that you come across the page, you like it, you don't want to sign up for a newsletter, or you just kind of want to keep your finger on the pulse with them, but not in any committed way. It's the way we are with information. And it just helps really to give you a feed. You can actually set it up if you use Mail or another email program. You can set them up in there. It comes through your inbox, and you can very quickly decide if there's anything that will prove interesting or useful. You can actively go out and search and find pages and subscribe to their feeds, or you can do a search through, I don't know, Google News or something, and get things pushed to you that way. RSS and news readers, I should say. I'm just giving you some kind of practical ways of accessing the information and keeping abreast of it on a regular basis, because some of this is about regularity. So you want to be regularly absorbing news at a reasonably surface level. I hope that doesn't sound too negative, but you want to be exposing yourself to news quite regularly. And then when something piques your interest, or you think that it's relevant for this project or for some other area of your life, you then want to go into depth with it. So those are the two ways that I tend to absorb news. And there are different things that you can do to make something more likely to get read. I use Readability, that's what the armchair is. I just have a little plug-in in my browser, and I press that every time that I see an article. It's too long, I don't have time at that particular time, so it sends it to my Readability homepage. It also nicely cleans it up, gets rid of all the adverts and extraneous bits of rubbish. And so when I get to my Readability page, it's nice, it's clean, it looks a bit more like a document that I'd like to read. I also get that pushed to my Kindle. The more devices I can push it to, the more I can delay actually having to read it. It tends to bottleneck if you don't stay on top of it. But maybe set something out specifically for this project. And is anyone doing this already? No. Okay. I think it is a reasonably transformative experience. It has been for me, because I do find it challenging to absorb the information that is out there, because I'm interested in stuff, and I think there are some practical things that we can do to make it more likely for us to kind of tick away, because we do have downtime. Unfortunately, when we have the downtime, we're generally not in front of the computer. We might be waiting for a train or a bus, or waiting for a human being or something like that. So it's about finding those windows and making it work for you. So whatever you do to get the news and to research and to develop your skills of discernment, there is no shortcut for writing. So that is the next obstacle on the path oftentimes. And if you're somebody that hasn't written a lot, or doesn't like writing, or doesn't feel what you write is good some of the time, then I would, the more you resist writing, the more I would encourage you to just start, because there isn't a shortcut to it. You just do it, and then you get better because you keep doing it, even when you don't feel like you're doing a good job. And this is a written project, and outside of this project, I think these skills are useful, but there are lots of reasons why we procrastinate. I found this and liked it, so I thought I'd share. These memes that they have a picture. I'll find a picture for it later. Procrastination, and I'm probably sort of talking to myself a little bit with this, but when I have assignments to do that are written, that I know that will I will need to basically engage my brain in a way that it resists, which is academic writing a lot of the time. Even though I think the format that you guys are being asked to write in isn't too daunting. There are lots of ways that we tend to put that off. I like to do housework and cook and other things that I think are vital to existence, but I really underneath it know that I'm putting off writing. And the other thing that I tend to do, and I don't seem to learn that much from experience, is that I know that I have a certain resistance process that I go through. And I know that when I'm on the other side of that resistance process, I'm good. I'm writing quite productively, but I don't sometimes push myself through that. I will be in that process. So this is where this power of discernment, you're going to exercise it on yourself and your own habits and quirks and reasons why you procrastinate. Who thinks that they do procrastinate when it comes to writing stuff up? So that's everyone. That's everyone in the room, with the exception maybe of a couple of people who just haven't confessed. So that's why I made a point of making a big deal of this, is just start it as a habit. Just write an email to yourself every day and have it be about this subject. And don't kind of build it up in your head that it's the project brief. Just free yourself up in some way. Writers. My cat needs my love. The denial thing I also find quite interesting. I do that. I kind of just go, my brain works really well in the night time. And then I do everything and it gets really late. And then I get really stressed because you can't they haven't worked a way that you can add more hours to the day. So you realise that you're going to have to wake up at a certain point anyway. And that actually begins stressing you out and making your brain less productive, and it all impacts. Anyway, I've got looks of recognition, so I know you know what I'm talking about. And writers have this same issue. So practical ways of doing it, just do a bit of free writing for 15 minutes. So even outside the idea that you're emailing yourself about the subject that you'll be writing about, and there's just write something, anything. Like it could be a journal entry, it could be a letter to a family member or friend or something to just get you partway through that resistance curve. And if you approach that with some freedom, you're at least in the curve. You're a little bit further than you were. So who thinks they work better with music on, or with some background noise, or in a cafe, or I really, what I'm going to ask, because I'm not going to, say that I know you better than you know yourselves. I know that I used to think that. And I would just really encourage you to experiment with yourself and see whether that really is, and try and be quite methodical about your exploration, so that it isn't, all a bit open to interpretation, so that you really kind of, maybe set yourself, I know this sounds kind of boring, but it's just about this assignment, but also about self-awareness. Set yourself, 15 minutes, let's just starts off 15 minutes with the music on, and all the usual kind of things that you'd have going, and decide to write. And then at the same time and under the same conditions, right? So I'm not asking you after you've done that to then go and do 15 minutes without music, because you've already been writing for 15 minutes, so there's not the same conditions. Maybe the next day, same time of day, just to try and make it as controlled as possible. Turn everything off and do it. Something I discovered over the summer, I know this is going to be hard for you guys to do, but it's something that maybe you could even think about online, is the power of the group psyche. So when you're in a room, if you're all in a room together and you go, right, let's write for 30 minutes, there's some kind of weird process that the collective psyche gathers momentum, and you actually focus and produce an amazing amount of work in a short space of time. So I don't know how you make that work practically, but it could be that, we or you could set up some chunks of writing. Just find a time that works. You're already going, nothing, we just haven't got the same timetables. But it is something you can tap into if you so decide, or just bear it in mind for other areas of life. And also maybe think about putting your subconscious to work. There are tons of self-help stuff, books and resources out there that talk about programming your brain before you go to bed, focusing on a problem that you have that you'd like to put your subconscious mind to work on overnight. The same principles apply to writing. If you can write either first thing in the morning when you don't feel like your brain's engaged yet, or maybe late at night if you're a morning person and your brain's not engaged, but I'm probably assuming if you're posties that you're late night people. Any early morning birds? No. Okay. Prove that one. Yeah. So put your minds to work first thing in the morning. That's the challenge, is just to see what comes out. And it could actually be a useful practical tool, either to get, the resistance out of the way, or to tap into something beyond that mind of yours that you already know so well. That's us done, which is good, because I did want to keep it to about an hour. So I feel like, we can go over the project brief a little bit more. We've got a couple of other sessions that we'll be doing online, and then we'll go into tutorials where we'll talk about your projects once you've gathered some momentum with them, and we can do that one by one if that's helpful. So does anyone have any questions at this point? Yeah.
My main concern for me is not so much procrastination, it's getting started. I'm gonna
What's the difference?
I'm going to find it really hard thinking of a question. I know there's some examples here, but would it be okay if I saw last year's questions, not their reports, but just what they asked? And that might give me a bit of that running.
Shall I pick up
Yeah,
some
sure.
of this?
Yeah.
So as I mentioned, some wrote about cloud. There are 2 reports on cloud, as something that is changing in the broader sense how we trade, but it's also something that's only in the last 2 or 3 years been embraced by post houses, and how they use, for example, foreseen. Places like Envy, in a sense, it's like it's like a service that the client pays for extra. So it's an interesting model. So there are things around that. There were reports around. See if I can find. Around visual effects houses, there were several students who were interested in visual effects, and were looking at, for example, that model I was talking about, which is how visual effects works out house on film sets, and the freelance market for that. There was one about trailer houses. If you wanted to start, I don't know, it might be that we can have a little brainstorm here about just scope out the kinds of things we could talk about in places where you might find a story and start looking. So today, for example, I'm having a conversation with someone who is a visual effects artist, and she also teaches. And so she told me today something that is really worth exploring, that NPC, the big visual effects house, one of the big 5, NPC, has just opened a visual effects academy. Now, what does that mean? Why are they doing it? And are they making money from it? Or do you pay fees to study there, to work? Are they doing it because there's a skill shortage and because they want to train up visual effects artists in their own likeness? Are they doing it because they don't see that there are enough feeder courses for their, and what is the model for that? Are they going to be making money out of that? And then talking of visual effects, I'd be interested in Escape. There's an extraordinary model for training as a really big business. So they started here and they expanded, to Los Angeles. They're huge. They're hosting an event, as you know, this month. They're just. Any of you guys sign up for that? Visual effects? Yeah, you are as well. So, if you're interested in visual effects, why wouldn't you explore? Go look at their model, their business model. One of the places I would absolutely go look at straight off is UK Screen Association. Maybe if you could find that. If you Google UK Screen Association. Do you know this place? This is the trade organisation for post-production houses and broader for facility houses too. But the membership for UK Screen would include pretty much every post house you can think of. They have a news page, so they tend to be a kind of rather informational, advertorial, I should say, than about hard news. But it's worth exploring. If you go to news, and you go to, so latest, for January, Malone Partner, I don't know who Malone Partner Screen, but some of these things can, if they're not in themselves great and important, breaking news, MPC create epic environments and complex crowds. MPC, one of those big companies that will have lots of stories around them. If you go back to where you were, and then look at December, you can track back through. One of the things that caught my eye was Sequence. Right, Frank Piazza is a graduate of ours. Did you see that? From the year before last, and he's just won some kind of award. And he's working at, that's in itself, it's not going to be anything of particular interest to you. But Sequence Post is a really interesting organisation that's worth profiling. They do things slightly differently. They're a bit quirky. They're on the edge of things. One or two of you have worked at Sequence, I think. Have you? Anyone worked at Sequence? They've been particularly loving towards Ravensbourne. They come give master classes. They talk to our students. They've employed a huge number, and some of them are rocketing away. Frank Piazza is doing so well up there right now. The guy who ran Sequence now is a graduate from Ravensbourne, not from this course, interestingly, but from another, I think from the production course. Anyway, there's a lot of sympathy there. They're a busy company, but if you're interested in looking at some of the stuff they're doing and learning a little bit about their business model, it may be that they would open up to a Ravensbourne student. So I'm just saying, there are places where you could start to get the first traces of an idea for something that you might want to explore. And then Broadcast itself, obviously, is a big magazine, but you could start, do searches within Broadcast to find articles that have been recently written, something around Post, that might spark an interest in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton, actually, for some reason these aren't visible, but there's a ton of links on here, which include Broadcast. So, and they all, often just have news sections where you can go. And once you've been to a few within the same area, more or less, you'll get a flavour of what the emergent areas are within, the technical part of post-production, within the business models underpinning it, within how things are working internationally, how things are working locally here in the UK, in London.
One of the other things interesting me around visual effects that I picked up from the person I had lunch with, Claudia, who teaches here, was again something around a shift in, a new trend in visual effects, which is moving or stealing the crown from Nuke, and that is this combination of Cinema 4D and After Effects. And for some reason, just in the last year or two, as a double act, they've been storming the market, not necessarily the feature film market, but everything else, advertising and TV. And again, you might look, certainly if anyone's interested in visual effects, you might look to see, exactly what's going on, investigate that somewhat further. There are the big post houses, and then there are small ones, and often you'll find innovation at the boutique end as well. And in fact, perhaps more sympathy, or easier anyway, to have access to seniors at the boutique end of the market. Anyone, as we were, as Angela's been talking about, has anyone got any ideas in their head about what they might start to explore in terms of post-trade? Any thoughts about what, even if you're not going to explore it, any thoughts that come into your head about what might or might not be eligible?
Whether Avid's going to be quite where it is in 5 years?
That's a huge question. What would you focus on?
Premiere. People are starting to cut films with Premiere now and starting to make a big deal out of it because you can use the whole Creative Cloud to use
Sure.
effects. But you've got to go and all the effects.
Absolutely.
The effects studios are in the left, other than to the left, back in the heads of the network.
So, if you, for example, that's an interesting. We need to look at the learning outcomes, because it's not just about trends. It is about, if you like, the business model underpinning this whole thing. But Gone Girls is a really interesting case study. Yeah.
That might be more relevant for the next.
For the next one. Yeah.
The next one.
Yeah. So, but nevertheless, because the giants, Adobe and Avid, I think it'd be really quite hard to do like primary research on those sorts of things.
And also with larger companies and big issues like that, there's lots of drivers that make it more of a complex thing to tackle, and so maybe to be just strategic about where you focus your time. I think the smaller you can make your target area, the more likely you are to have a reasonably sane journey, but to deliver something that has considered a range of issues and gone into some depth and done that within 1,500 words. So yeah, just to be pragmatic, a big kind of meaty issue I would probably stay away from.
I mean, one of the things you could be doing is, in a sense, reverse engineering the question from Absolute Post. It's a brilliant little kind of boutique post house that I really want to work there. I like the work they do. Work backwards from there. How would get a foot in the door? What is it about them that's interesting there? How long they've been in the market? Who are their contenders? Who their competition? What is it about their model that's allowed them to endure? You think about, maybe start with specifics rather than something too broad brushstroke.
I mean, you talk about Envy and their business model and how they focused on something that actually didn't really have much to do with post-industry, or it was about understanding there was a potential client base that hadn't been serviced in that way, that if they had, the facilities that would make clients feel like they were really being looked after in sort of 5-star, who would think that would be an issue? Wouldn't it be the quality of the editors and the quality of the output and the creative vision? But actually, people they're going to be sat down for hours and into the late nights, and does people want material comfort? So that was a route that paid dividends for Envy.
Who's going to be VE this year? Cool. Again, reverse engineer a question from who's a BVE?
Yeah.
BVE is cutting edge. This is not a technology report, but of course everything's interrelated. Product and the cheaper and more ready availability of gadgets, tools, software, hardware, software. EditShare, for example, makes a really interesting case study. Who knows EditShare? Do you know EditShare? Yeah. What do you know about it?
Well, no, we use it at work.
Okay.
Just trying to phase it out.
You're trying to phase it out?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't understand why.
But if you had a mind to, you might investigate something like that. They're a really interesting company, rather like, you might want to do, like a profile Blackmagic, with an interesting company with an interesting offer. What is the business model for free? Free software, and why do they do it? It's the same model for EditShare. EditShare have a free non-linear package. What's that called? It's one of the oldest around in the industry. You heard of Lightworks? Yeah, that's EditShare. And it was, at one time, one of the really big contenders pitted against Avid. And it's a great piece of kit. You know, the feature film, King's Speech, was edited on that. It's free to download. And it's offered by EditShare. And why they offer it is for the same reason that Blackmagic offer DaVinci. They want you to buy the kit, they want you to buy in-out boxes and servers and so on. Does that start to...
Would that go with Arbury Folk? That's more of a company, not relatively editing post-house.
I think it goes in the territory. This is about post. And yes, it can be. I think it should be.